If you do not know the subject well enough to explain it to somebody else, that's going to be very difficult to give a presentation on it, right? Because you're going to be terrified, you're not sure what you're talking about, and nervousness will take over. Anticipating your audience. Is this informal, formal, or an academic setting? You need to be able to kind of identify your audience. And what are pause words? Well, words such as that we use to give ourselves just a moment to think. Okay. Now, what do we do with body language? First thing, let's define it. Your body language is your posture, your movement, eye contact, and hand motions. All of these things are a little bit different in person, but for the past 2 years, we've all been used to online classes, online meetings, working from home, and body language has taken a slightly less important approach when you're online. Now, what can you do about your body language? First things first, just like your mother always said, sit up or stand up straight. You need to have good posture. If you're slouched, if you're slumping, if you're leaning way back, it ruins your credibility for anybody that is watching you or talking to you. Okay. You're going to look like you're bored or perhaps not interested. Why would they be interested if you aren't? Okay. So just like your mother said, sit up or stand up straight. Your movement. If you're online, your movement is curtailed. That means that you're not going to be able to move around as much. Currently, I'm sitting in a chair in front of a computer. About the biggest range of motion I have is to slide back and forth. Okay. However, if you're speaking in public in person, you'll probably be on stage or at the very least in front of a group of people. If you're running back and forth, it's hard to follow you. So you need to move with purpose. Slow movements are better than fast. So if you want to move to the other side of the stage, don't run, walk. Okay. If you have some sort of presentation behind you, don't stand in front of it. It makes it harder to see. So stand to one side or the other. If you're online, much like this, we don't have to worry about it because you're all seeing the same screen that I am. Maybe keep an eye in the camera, but as far as movement, you don't have to worry about it. So eye contact. Online, eye contact, it's almost pointless. I'm looking at my screen, I'm not looking at my camera, and I'm trying not to look around the room because if I'm distracted, it's really easy for you to become distracted as well. The idea for an online presentation is to look at the screen so that it gives the illusion that you're making eye contact. Now, how do we do this in person? It's easy. Once you've stopped running around the stage and you find where you're going to stand, you'll want to scan the crowd. You don't want to stop on any one person in particular, because if you do, that person is going to see you and then they're going to feel like you're staring at them. And you don't want to, while you're in front of a crowd, it's going to distract your audience and it's probably going to make whoever you're staring at very uncomfortable. It could also potentially cause you to lose your train of thought and not be able to complete your sentence, which would be bad. So scan the room, make eye contact with several people. Try to hold that eye contact for maybe a second or 2 seconds and then move to the next person. Hand motions. If you haven't noticed, I love to talk with my hands. Hand motions can be used to emphasize your words, especially online. This is where most of your motion comes from. You don't want to move quickly. You can have slower motions that you use to emphasize words with. Don't just exercise. If you're doing this number, it looks like you're giving a Zumba class or something along those lines, and it's distracting. People will feel your nervousness through your movements. So if you're making fast hand motions, or you're staring at one person and afraid to look around, or you're running around the stage like crazy, you're going to appear nervous, and it's going to make people not pay as much attention as they could. We want them to pay attention to your words and your presentation, not your motions. So what do I mean by knowing your stuff? These are the 3 steps to knowing your stuff. First, you need to learn it. Okay. It's okay not to know every little detail about your subject. But the more you know about it, the easier it will be for you to discuss it and talk about it and answer questions. Definitely use correct pronunciation. If you are presenting about a topic that you can't pronounce, that ruins your credibility and no one will listen to you. And even if they do, they will question whether or not you know. Oh, I love it. Sorry, somebody's drawing on the screen. But if you can't pronounce the words that you're saying in your presentation, it's very difficult for your audience to take you seriously and believe the information that you are giving them. And last, if you know your topic and you have explained it well, you're probably going to have several questions from your audience. That is where it will truly show whether you have learned the material or not. Now, obviously, you can't predict what questions will be asked, and that means you can't prepare for everything. So if you know the subject, you can think for a moment and then give a thoughtful reply. If you do not know the subject, you're going to have to say, I'm sorry, I don't know, right? That will most likely ruin whatever credibility you had with your audience. So know your subject, know your stuff, learn it, pronounce it, and be able to answer questions about it. Now, anticipating your listeners. This is arguably the most important part of public speaking. What do I mean by this? For Reza and any of my other members here in Wall Street, you've heard me talk about this many times. There are different types of English. If you are in school, or if you are in Wall Street, or EF, or IALF, or Celts, or British Council, it does not matter. They will all tell you exactly the same thing, and that is there is informal English and there is formal English. There's a lot of space in between these two, right? So what is in this space? Informal English is where we use slang. Slang is actually a slang term because it means situational language. We use slang with people we have close relationships to. Typically, these are your friends or family. Slang is not proper English. It is something like saying, hey, what up? Proper English. Proper English is using correct grammar and no slang. Proper English is when we would say, how are you? Then I'm going to come to what I call formal English. Formal English really just means polite. This is where you will use titles. and yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, please, thank you, excuse me. Even if you've known this judge your entire life, you're not going to look at him and say, "Oh, John, how are you doing?" Okay. You will refer to him as Judge Smith or whatever his surname is, because that is the use of titles. Okay. You could also use honorifics like Your Honor or something of that nature. But the use of polite terms like that and proper English will make it formal. But Derek, my teachers always told me I had to use high-level vocabulary and high-level grammar. Isn't that what makes something formal? No. High-level vocabulary and high-level grammar is what we call academic English. This is where we want to sound smart, okay? You will use academic English primarily in school, always in school, right? And you'll probably also use it in the workforce. If you are creating articles to be read online, or if you are writing for magazines or journals or papers, or maybe even you're just making advertisements, you want to use words that make your product look good. This is where we will start using higher vocabulary and grammar structures. The difference there: for informal, what's up? Proper, how are you? Formal, excuse me, sir, how are you today? Academic, excuse me, how fare thee today? It is the same thing as proper. You just use higher vocabulary. Then we come to the academic formal. This is where you will use extremely high vocabulary and grammatical structures, as well as formal polite terms. An example of this is, say, doctors. Okay. If you go to the doctor and your stomach hurts, you're going to say to the doctor, "Oh, I have a stomach ache, my belly hurts," something like that. Doctors use higher level vocabulary than we do, right? They're going to turn around and say something to the effect of, "You're suffering from gastritis." Okay. Sounds weird to us, but when that doctor speaks to another doctor, it'll be, "Oh, Dr. Johnson, my patient is suffering from gastritis. Can you prescribe any alternative methods of treatment?" Versus, "Hey, he's got a stomach ache. What can we do for him?" Okay. So you have to kind of gauge your audience and decide which level of English or type of English that you want to use. If it's your friends or people that you're very close to, you can use informal language, not a problem. If you are in any situation, the use of proper English is always acceptable. You can speak proper English to your friends, family, or even strangers. Never is there a situation that you cannot speak proper English. But when do we use formal? Again, formal is going to be for people you don't know, or for people that you're trying to be polite to. In your own language, you already know how to do this. Okay. I'm assuming that all of you are from Indonesia. The easiest way that I can explain formal is it's the difference of when you will call somebody mas versus calling somebody bapa, right? And again, academic, that's work or school. And your academic formal is when you are talking to other professionals in your field, right? So knowing this will help you to craft your presentation and the words that you want to use in it so that you can be understandable. If you are going to speak to a group that is maybe a lower level of English, or you are not sure of their level. Absolutely proper English, and probably formal because they're strangers. Academic, probably not, because the goal of communication is always to be understood. If you start using vocabulary that is too difficult or too high level, if your audience is lower level, they will not understand you. If you are addressing an audience that you are sure is higher level, by all means, feel free to use academic or the academic formal. That is up to you and your anticipation of your audience. This is arguably the most important thing you can do when deciding what you're going to say in a presentation. So our last point is going to be pause words. This one is difficult, and it's because we all do it. Everyone does it. Every language has different ones, but some pretty universal ones are and it's okay. We all get nervous. This is one of those things that happens when you get nervous. Occasionally it happens if you forget a word, right? You're trying to give yourself a moment to think so that you can figure out what you were trying to say. That's okay. If you do this, it's not the end of the world, but it can be extremely distracting. So one of the things that you can practice in order to not use pause words, this is the really big word, circumlocution. What that means is if you forget a word, don't stop. Don't stop talking. Don't think, what was that word? It's okay. You know what you mean. So instead of trying to use that exact word, talk around it. Tell us what the word means. Describe the word. For instance, if I'm talking about the color red and I suddenly can't remember the word for red, I could say, it's the color on stop signs or fire trucks or telephone booths, you know, that color. And you'll probably be able to visualize it and you will know what I'm talking about, even though I can't remember the word. This does two things. One, it keeps your audience engaged, because as soon as you lose your train of thought and start umming, it's really easy for the audience to get distracted as well. And two, it helps you not lose your place when you're speaking. Nothing is worse than when you forget a word and you stop and try to remember it and can't, because your presentation will end right there, at least for 10 seconds while you try to figure out what you were saying. And with that, the next piece of advice I'm going to give you is something my grandmother told me, and it was a quote. All right. And that is simply that to err is human, to forgive divine. So never forget, we are all going to make mistakes. It will happen. You cannot stop it. Okay. That doesn't mean you will always make mistakes, just simply that you will at some point. When it happens, do not beat yourself up. We are always our own worst critics. Forgive yourself, learn from it, and move on. Okay. So this is my advice to you to help you with public speaking. Remember your body language. Remember your audience. Figure out what you are going to talk about. Learn it. And try not to do too many pause words. So thank you all very much.
Speak up, I will. 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 Speak up, I will.
Unfortunately, this is the end. Ladies and gentlemen, until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for having me, guys. And I wish everybody luck in your endeavors with public speaking.